Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm going to be tackling another patron request, this time coming from Rotted Soul and friend of the channel, Catherine, who wanted me to watch and review the 2019 movie, Vivarium. Before I get into this review, I do want to just point out that if you've been watching my channel and you've been digging my content, but you're not subscribed, please do so. It really does help me out a whole lot. So Vivarium, this one has been on my radar for a long time now, and I'm really glad that not only had I not watched it because this made for a really good first time watch, but also that I hadn't looked up any information about it. I went in pretty much as blind as possible. I had seen the poster, I knew who starred in it, and that was it. So in keeping with the nature of that and not wanting to spoil anything for anybody else, I am going to be doing right here a spoiler-free review that is going to be very, very light on any kind of plot details. And then from there, I'm going to transition into a spoilery conversation deep dive discussion about it, because I really do kind of want to get into the guts of this thing. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the spoiler-free version. Written and directed by Lorcan Finnegan and also written by Garrett Shanley, this movie stars Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg, playing Gemma and Tom respectively, a young couple living in the UK that are madly in love and are basically looking to, proceed with the next stage of their life together. So before a bunch of housing gets snatched up, they decide to go ahead and visit with the realtor and take a look at what's available. And the realtor says, well, you're in luck. We do have stuff, but it is going fast. So why don't I go ahead and take you to this wonderful little neighborhood we have going here that's called Yonder, which I actually really dig. I mean, where do you live? Over yonder. Anywho, they go and they drive out to what at surface level just appears to be a tract home suburban nightmarescape, and they go and visit the house, and then from there, the real horror of the movie begins, and that's as much as I am going to describe it. I think that anything else, any other information, if you already haven't heard anything, I don't want to give up the ghost, because this is a wild ride, and it's nothing that I expected at all. Now, for me and my money, I do think that this movie was absolutely worth the watch. I enjoyed it a great deal. I did, however, have to kind of shift my mindset in the middle of watching it, because as things were unfolding from the layup of the beginning, I was really trying to analyze what was going on. And about midway through, at a certain key few points, I did have to basically just kind of throw my hands up in the air and just say, well, it's time to accept this movie for exactly what it is and stop trying to figure out the behind the scenes of anything. Which is fine, I suppose. That's fine, I guess. I don't know. I prefer movies that have a mechanism to them that I can try and figure out while I'm watching it, and I can attempt at the very least to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the screenwriter, and then at the end of the day potentially still be surprised by something that I didn't even see coming. And that's really just not the case with this movie. It's nothing that you really need to try and figure out. It's a movie that is just more meant to be absorbed. And the acting performances by Imogen Poots especially, but also Jesse Eisenberg, were fantastic. They really brought this couple to life, and the relationship that they had with one another, not only the love that they had, but also the strain that the relationship went through as the conflicts just kept piling up. I believed it. I felt it. It was very emotional and very raw for me. And the visual element of Vivarium, I think, was especially good. I was flabbergasted at a lot of the things that they pulled off. The nightmare-inducing imagery in this film was just... I mean, I literally did. I don't think it was a nightmare, but I definitely dreamt about this film the night after I watched it. So when I look back on Catherine's reasoning for why she picked this movie, which according to her, because for me, it was a mindfuck of a movie, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, my thoughts are very much that it was a mindfuck of a movie, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. I highly recommend it. I'm not going to say it's a movie for everybody, but for me, it really resonated. The characters brought it to life. The imagery sold the horror, and a lot of the subtleties of the subtext, which I'll be talking about in just a minute here, really drove the dagger home. So yes, I very much offer a blanket recommendation to the 2019 movie Vivarium. All right, so if you haven't seen this movie and or you care about spoilers in the slightest, now is the time to stop watching this video. Go ahead. I'll still be here. All right, here we go. Spoilers. So, wow, what a ride. Yeah, so like I was saying, I was really trying to figure out what was going on. I don't know, I was dismissing a lot of options right off the bat, and I think this movie did a good job as far as setting the tone for basically saying, that's not this kind of movie, knock it off. So, once the realtor disappeared, I kind of figured, okay, they're trapped. So, and sure enough, they were. So, at that point, I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, there's the obvious one of they're dead. And I was like, well, that's a little too obvious. Like, if that was that, I'd be honestly disappointed. And so I'm racking my brains trying to figure out what's next, aliens, things like that. And then about the time that, the clouds looked the same and the house got rebuilt after burning down, which I thought was an absolutely brilliant, clever move from the story writers here. Having Jesse Eisenberg basically just say, you know what, fuck it. I'm lighting this house on fire. And then having it immediately rebuilt the next morning was pretty clearly indicative of something that was going on beyond the means of natural resources, let's just say. There was no natural explanation for what could be possibly going on here, nor even really man-made explanations for what was going on here. Whatever was happening was more ethereal or extraterrestrial or whatever. And yeah, about that time, I started to basically just say, you know what? Doesn't matter. Whatever explanation, if they are going to try and explain this, would feel a bit lackluster. If you can actually rationally explain the machinations of a sinister mind and all the things that they did to set all this up, then yeah, okay, that is actually kind of compelling when you have an explanation that gets really in the weeds with the puppet master doing his thing. That's fantastic. And it got to the point where things were so outlandish and so unexplainable that any attempt at an explanation would have just felt cheap. So I'm glad that they didn't actually even really try it. Really, once I started basically just turning my brain, not necessarily off, but my analytical what's going on brain, when I turned that off and I just started absorbing the movie and trying to pick up more subtext and visual cues and so forth, I think things really kind of clicked home for me more. I was intrigued, I was captivated, but I don't think that I was appreciating the movie for exactly what it was until that moment. And again, I've been completely ignorant about any information surrounding this movie. I haven't watched other reviews. I haven't read any behind the scenes information. I haven't done any, watching any interviews with the filmmakers, anything like that. So everything of what I'm describing here is basically my interpretation of a lot of the subtext and a lot of the visual cues and so forth that I interpreted in this film from opening credits to end credits and nothing outside. So I could be completely off base, and I run that risk.
It really showed me how the mother-daughter bond can triumph over adversity.
No, that's not what I meant at all.
But
please, just sit down. I'm embarrassed for both of us.
But even so, what I basically figured this was a bit of an allegory for the absolute nightmare. It's probably one of the most cynical, pessimistic takes I've seen of suburban life. So we have this situation where a young couple is ready to move on with the next stage of their life, and they get introduced to one of an entire neighborhood of copy-paste houses in which they are surprised with a baby, which does happen, and they are basically forced to stay together. They are forced to raise it. They feel stuck in this situation. And although they may start out somewhat together, in time, they wind up kind of fracturing, and the one of the couple winds up basically just going to the grind every day, digging his hole, working for the sake of working and not really getting anywhere, but at the same time, it's something to do, while the other one gets stuck with raising the child. And in time, they just go through their paces as they get older, as they get sicker, as they just go on. The kid gets older, the person goes out, digs their hole, person watches the kid, watches them grow up, and so on until they're dead. And like I said, that's a very cynical and pessimistic take on the whole concept of, the suburban life. And I get that. I absolutely understand that. But man, what a take on it. I never thought that somebody could actually like take the suburban nightmare imagery of Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands and actually make that place by comparison look like the pantheon of culture. And then the cyclical nature of that suburban living kind of thing, where once the child is raised and once he becomes a man, that is basically his role to continue on with the propagation of continuing with this lifestyle. And then also the notion that there are other people right alongside and doing the exact same thing, but always somehow outside of the field of view, always just in their own little bubble, because that's where everybody exists, in their own little bubble, in their own little suburban hellscape, in their own little number 9. Suburbia is kind of an interesting thing for me because I kind of grew up in some lower middle class suburban neighborhoods, the stuff that when the Navy came back from World War II, the homes that were built in the 1950s to accommodate those families, things like that. And I don't recall them being necessarily all that bad. I don't know, maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, by the nature of it being a lower middle class neighborhood, there was a little bit more vibrancy to it, a little bit more of, people just struggling to get by. So, have beers with the neighbors, enjoy life, that kind of thing. It kind of seems to me, and this is very potentially television and film stereotypes interpreting life, but it seems to me that when you get to the middle class or the upper middle class kind of thing, that's when the soul gets taken out of things a bit, when people care about their lawns. People around my neighborhood didn't give a shit about their lawns. But when you actually do get into that, where, they judge their neighbors based on flaking paint and, overgrown weeds and so forth, that you do tend to have a little bit more of those tiny boxes full of ticky-tacky kind of thing going. And for me, I'm glad that I wasn't raised in that environment. I'm of the firm belief that wherever you live, be it city, be it country, be it suburbia, be it urban areas, be it anywhere, that your neighborhood should have some soul to it, should have a beating pulse, should have the ability to have its own unique style and the vibrancy of life imbued within, so that you can look back on it with fond memories. Even if, all your memories of childhood, like mine, were definitely not all that pleasant, that I can look back on North Claremont and San Diego and say that that was a hell of a place to be raised. But I love the horror movies that kind of take that aspect of life and really deconstruct it and put it in a visual tone and a visual cue that allows us to really kind of analyze it at its most bare bone components and really view it through the lens of horror. And I can't think of a movie that has done the world of suburbia in terms of horror better than Vivarium. And I want to know what you thought of this review, of my thoughts, as well as what you thought generally of this movie. I'd love to hear your take on it if you want to go ahead and leave some comments below. So I think that should about do it for this review. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you on Friday for the last review of the month. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and